Well, hello everyone. Thanks for tuning in for another exciting episode of Westlaw Training. My name is Samuel Burbano, the Academic Account Manager for 10 schools from Indy to Pittsburgh and 8 of the 10 in Ohio. We're going to cover a few topics in the next 20 minutes that will help your law review journey this year be a great success. First, we'll talk about preemption checks, how to do those on Westlaw for both case comments, the shorter version of the law review work product, and of course the note, the longer version of a law review work product. Then we'll talk a little bit about cite checking on Westlaw, as well as resources like topic selection and development. Finally, we'll close it out with some information about complementary resources for more learning opportunities. Now, if you haven't heard of preemption, I would like to introduce it to you by way of the classic comic strip Calvin and Hobbes. In the first panel, Calvin is coming back home from school and is surprised by Hobbes the tiger jumping out at him, Calvin getting all bug-eyed in the second panel. And in the third panel, Hobbes says, "I thought that after 7 boring hours at school, you might appreciate one moment of pure abject terror." Now, in the law review context, after many hours crafting your work product, you might appreciate one moment of pure abject terror. And that happens when you are preempted, when somebody else publishes something that is exactly what you had been working on. So preemption checks are meant to prevent that from happening on the front end, identify when that has happened in the middle of the writing process so that way you can, of course, continue to write things that are novel and distinguishable so that way you can ultimately be published and not preempted. Let's show you how to do all those things on Westlaw. So the first type of preemption checking that you can do is preemption checking for case comments. These are shorter versions of the law review work product. And for more information about what they are and how to brainstorm yours, check the law review guide. It's downloadable and it should be in the annotations of this YouTube video somewhere down over here. So just paste that link into your browser, download the PDF, and learn more about case comments. But what I want to show you is the specifically preemption checking side of it. So somebody will have written law review work product about this case. It would, of course, be in secondary sources. You'll notice I'm ghosting over it with my mouse. And now, here we are inside the citing references, and you'll notice 10 secondary sources on Westlaw that cite to Keller. And you'll be able to look through them to decide whether any law review or journal article appears in those citing references. If it does, you may be preempted if you take a look at it and you find that it is exactly about the same thing and making the same arguments that you intend to make. But let's just assume that everything is hunky-dory, that there isn't anything that speaks to your issue or your argument for Keller and your case comment. Well, you're not home free all the way. You, of course, now need to set an alert. That button over there, you'll see it highlighted with that bell. And what we're going to do now is walk you through that process so that way you don't have to be coming back to Keller constantly. You can set that alert and know that it's running in the background. Westlaw will notify you when new law reviews, new journals come out. Once you click on that bell button, you'll have the option to go through the alert screens, and I'll show you what each of those are. The first is the basics. I will typically name my alert this way. Maybe case note, fall preemption case note, or fall preemption work product of some name or another, and you'll give it a description. And then you'll offer the citation. It will automatically fill that one out for you. A couple other things that you can do here, assigning them to alert groups. So if you have a ton of alerts, sometimes you'll want to group these alerts in particular areas for ease of editing and recall. But just for the sake of argument, these 3 things, naming the alert, describing it, and citing it, those are the main things that you will fill out. Once you have hit continue on step 1, then you will go into step 2. And what you're looking at here is including citing references. So every time that this case is cited by something on Westlaw, you're going to see that. You may have the option to limit citing references to negative treatment, but I would not check that because obviously a law review article can't overrule a case, and if you limit your citing references to the negative treatment, you won't get any law reviews. All right, next thing is detail level. If you have it on most detail, that's probably going to be easiest for you. You could even narrow it by content type and other filters. You might be able to say, I want to filter out only law reviews and journals. Personally, I would recommend leaving all the citing references in there to give your analysis not only more nuance, but if there's a practice article, a treatise section that comes out about it, you know, there may be some possibility that your arguments have been anticipated and preempted there. Include history references is an option that I would also leave checked, detail level, most detail as well. But just leave the settings like this if you would, and then when you hit continue, then you're on to step 3. Now, step 3 is going to ask you to customize delivery. And honestly, the main thing when you're looking at customizing delivery is picking recipients. You can, of course, add more recipients from your contacts. Personally, I would just send the alert to myself rather than to too many other people. And then when you give it a subject so that way your spam filter doesn't kick it out, email note if you need to jog your memory. Sometimes you can check this box to include the full text of new documents so that the entire law review article ends up in your attachments. But personally, I would not check that just because these are going to include links to Westlaw, and you can obviously just click on it there, and that way it doesn't clog your inbox. You'll be able to select a bunch of different formats. Pretty much any format that Westlaw delivers in, you could get delivered as an alert in your inbox. So if you've got these settings all squared away, then go on to the next page. You'll schedule the alert. I would run the alert daily just for my own peace of mind, but you can, of course, set it to run less frequently than that, weekly, bi-weekly. And then, of course, alert at this time. So this can be handy because then that way you know when to expect your email. Have it come in when you're getting your morning coffee so that way when you sit down, if there is something, you will get an email. Now, there are a couple other final options that are extremely important. One is the end date. I would set an end date after you know that your publication has a deadline so that way you don't continue to get emails about this, even though it's not important to you. And I would make sure that this is unchecked, right? Do not alert yourself if there are no results, because otherwise you'll be getting an email saying no results. Well, as long as you're not getting emails, that should be enough for you, right? So make sure it looks something like this. Change the frequency if you like. Change the alert time if you like. And then, behold, you've got that alert set. You can always manage your alerts from this part of the Westlaw window in the upper right-hand corner. You see how it says alerts. You can, of course, check the checkbox. You can delete those alerts. You can run them again. You can sort them. You can go through all the usual file and folder management type tools, but just applicable in alerts. And again, you can get to those from the upper right-hand corner where it says alerts. Now let's talk about preemption checks for notes. And because notes are more wide-ranging than here's why this case was decided rightly or wrongly, you're going to have to run a more intense search. And the way you'll do that is by starting in the Law Reviews and Journals database. So step 1 is to type Law Reviews up here. Step 2, wait till that turns up, ghost it over so it turns blue, then click on it. Now you're inside Law Reviews and Journals. Step 3 is to click on this Advanced Search button to bring up this Advanced Search template. Now, in the past, you may have learned about all the terms and connectors. There will be a list of terms and connectors here in the annotations, as well as some more information, more YouTube videos, help like that. So go ahead and copy paste that in if you're interested in more. But just know that if you create the search over here, it will show up here with the terms and connectors. So you don't need to know them all down pat. You just need to follow these instructions here, and then it will show up there. Now, the last thing that I would always do whenever I am trying to craft a terms and connectors search is to run it by the reference attorneys. Whenever you're running a Boolean terms and connectors search, you can always email the reference attorneys at tr.com with your question, with your inquiry, and they can also help you refine your search so that it includes the Boolean terms and connectors in the right way, so that that way you are pulling up all of the law review journals about, for instance, the dangerous propensities rule in the context of CAS. Shoot them an email like that, and then you will get a rockstar search which you can create your alert off of. Next, we'll talk a little bit about cite checks and quotations. We're continuing into Calvin and Hobbes. Calvin ordered into the tub by his mother and told to obey the letter of the law, if not the spirit. So even though Calvin is in the tub, you have to keep the water running, you have to obey the letter of the law. So cite checks are about finding out the letter of the law. Let me give you an example of the letter of the law here. Suppose you were told to look up this quote, "But fast is Lindy Hop," or if you've got ballroom shoes on and you are really, really good, then for demonstration and competition, they jack up the music. But typical rock and roll, triple step, back step, it's about that fast, ... How do you know that the person in that case, the person whose testimony is quoted in that case, actually said that? Maybe that person was scatting differently, shakada, or do-da-da-da-da. Who knows? Well, the way you can tell is by looking and quoting it right. That process is incredibly easy. All you need to do in that case is just make sure that your statement shows up in the quotation marks. So what I've gone and done here is pick a database to search, which is cases, and then just put as much of the phrase as you can in quotes. Then you'll be able to pick up the trail, you'll find ribus, and then you'll be able to verify the rest of the quotes there. Let's talk about cite checks for where the author is known. I'm looking for something written by a friend of mine in the Drake Law Review. So obviously step one is to pick a database. Here we've picked the Drake Law Review. And then step two is going to be to create our Boolean terms and connectors search from the document fields. The fields are going to be different depending on what source we're in. The cases fields are going to have tons of different options, like who's in the dissent, who's in the opinion, if there's anything in the headnotes. But for here, we're obviously looking for author, so typing in the name up here causes it to pop up over here, and then obviously we run the search as the third step. So step one, pick a source. Step two, fill out as many of these fields as we have information for, and then step three, just run that search. That'll find anything written with those search terms. Now let's talk about cite checks for where you know what the title is. Now instead of filling out the gentleman's name, we'll just fill in the title and it'll show up there, and then hit the search button in that case. Now, much as we love Westlaw and all the sources that it has, obviously Westlaw does not have every single source that's out there. So the way that you can figure out whether Westlaw has something like Uncle Anthony's is by typing it in the drop-down bar. You'll notice that while Westsearch is pulling up dockets with the name Anthony, Uncle Anthony, other court documents, we don't have that source. So you can notice that Uncle Anthony's is in print. You'll have to pull it that way to verify quotes and verify citations and things like that. If you're in oral advocacy teams, I highly suggest giving that a look-see because it's full of great themes and quotes that you can sprinkle through your work product. A little bit of a topic selection teaser now that we have covered a couple topics and we're on to a third topic. So what do these four images have in common? Chances are, if you are an aspiring lawyer, you've actually been here. These images have something in common because they're all taken at famous sites. And now notice I said at and not facing famous sites because this faces away from the Taj Mahal, away from the Great Wall of China, away from Stonehenge, and away from the White House. So in the world of topic selection, you can, like this photographer, have your work on exhibit, on display, if you find a novel way of looking at something. Obviously, if I showed 4 pictures of famous sites, that probably wouldn't make a fancy photography exhibition anywhere. So how do you find those novel topics, those novel views? Well, one way obviously is to start looking in cases. Obviously, if you don't like typing in the name of the source and going, you can click through here. So cases, Pennsylvania cases, Indiana cases, Ohio cases. And then run this Boolean search for recent cases. I'll have this included, again, in the list of annotations here, so you can just copy paste the text into Westlaw. But that's the terms and connectors search you can use to pull up recent cases, and then use the filtering menu along the left-hand side for topics or other areas of interest. Now, there's something else that you can do, which is to include searches where your court is looking at issues of first impression. So if you use that Boolean terms and connectors search, that should winnow it down significantly. Or what about for existing law reviews? So a law review that says, I'm going to talk about A and B, but C is beyond the scope of this article. Well, try running a Boolean terms and connector search with those terms for something within 2016 or maybe 2015, change those dates up, and then take a look at those topics, see if any of those interest you, and if the primary law underneath it has evolved in an exciting direction. Now, what about using practical law for topic selection? You can get to this from any Westlaw screen. You'll notice that drop-down wedge, like with the copy with reference drop-down wedge. You use that, and instead of ghosting over Westlaw, give a click to practical. Within practical law, there's a resource called Legal Updates, and you'll see how these are written by the practical law attorney editors when we've got cool new emerging issues. You'll notice that if you run a search for the phrase first impression within Legal Updates, and then sort by date, you'll be able to unearth pertinent and recent legal updates, and then, of course, filter by the practice areas over here. Now, what about Westlaw journals? Again, typing this source in the big blue bar and then clicking on the name of the source once it pops up will bring you into that database. So obviously here you can see any number of topical areas which you can run. Now for a little bit of other resources. Within Westlaw, I'll just touch on these briefly. The first is news, so tons of sources like Reuters News, world's largest news organization, filings and tables of authorities within cases, and specifically the blue striped key cite flag unique to Westlaw, which is going to show you that this case, at the time that I pulled the key cite status, was on appeal from the Sixth Circuit all the way up to the Supremes. So then you'd be able to see what arguments are coming up and maybe make a prediction or make some policy recommendations based on what's going on over there. Now for a little bit of a side note, drafting.westlaw.com is going to give you something called WestCheck. And you'll sign in with the same username and password that you use for Westlaw. You'll be able to upload your work product, extract the citations according to any given jurisdiction's citation manual. Westlaw will identify the cites within your document and ask Westlaw, do you have this? Do you have this? For stuff that we don't have, or where the citation is wrong, you might be wise to give that a second look. But for everything where we do have key cite data, something really you'll be able to get a WestCheck report that gives you the citation status of everything where we do have that citation. So there are a couple options for sharing all your notes. One is to share all of them inside a given document, and then you use this drop-down wedge, and then you use share all my annotations, so that way you can use the same folder sharing functionality there. Another way of doing it, so this way of doing it involves clicking inside the note, and then within the note there'll be to share individual note with contacts. Do that if, for instance, Houston has privileged material and you only want to share parts of your notes, the non-privileged stuff, with collaborators on law review. Within folders themselves, you're going to see some enhancements that might be helpful to you. You're going to see that Westlaw identifies the issues that you are foldering in any given folder, like this child support one, and then it may suggest additional resources to help you out. Specifically, the recommended documents are primary law for now, cases, statutes. Finally, a word about complementary resources. I alluded to the reference attorneys who can help you create rockstar Boolean terms and connector searches, but they can do a whole lot more. You can call them, email them, live chat them. We've, of course, got the on-demand webcasts and the academic account management team, which includes the academic account managers and, in schools that have them, student reps. If you're one of my schools, send me an email, look at my in-person availability on Twitter, and I look forward to connecting with you soon.